This is Visual Basic, and let's learn how to trace while loops. Well, let's start with a review of a for loop. We already studied those a few months ago. In this exercise number 1, the way that Mr. Minnick likes you to trace code, you would note that sum is being declared with the value 0. Then you notice that the for loop starts the loop variable j at 1. Then you would use this plus equal symbol to take that 1 that's in j and add it into the variable sum, crossing the 0 out, putting a 1 there. And when you hit the word next, Jonelle, what does the computer do when it hits the word next? It goes back up to the top of the for loop. And Bailey, what's the amount, how much do we step j by in a for loop when there's no step typed out?
We step by 1.
Good job. We step by 1. Good to have you paying attention. You are the model student. So really, it's as if there's a step 1 here. It doesn't have to be typed, but it is. So let's cross that 1 out and make it a 2, because that's what step 1 does. It adds 1 to it. Hey, we hit the plus equals again. But this time, j is not 1. This time, j is equal to 2. So a 2 gets added into the variable sum. So sum is now up to 3. Don't mess up on the math, please. Let's just clean this up a little bit here. And now we go back, according to Jonelle, we go back up to the top of the for loop. According to Bailey, we step 1 here. We step our j by 1. And now, because j is equal to the upper boundary, we do go through the loop again. And therefore, we do add the value 3. We do add the value 3 to the variable sum. So the 3 that's currently stored in j is added in, because that's what the plus equals does. It adds it in here to the variable sum. I've got to make sure I put it in the right spot. This is now 6. And Jonelle knows that we hit the word next, which means go back up to the top. But this time, because Bailey says step 1, it's up to 4. Because that 4 is over the 3, we stop and we don't go through the loop anymore. So this exercise is now finished, and I always like you to circle your final values. That is what you should have as your scratch work for problem number 1. That was all review. I have many more videos back in an earlier unit, to review how to trace for loops. But there's a time and a place to use a while loop. And sometimes you'll see some programmers use while loops, and you might have wanted to use a for loop, but the other programmer used a while loop. So you have to know how to trace other people's code that uses while loops. Let's do number 2 here. Okay, well first, this is easy. Num is equal to 1 and sum is equal to 0. Check, check. I did that. We hit a while loop. A while loop has something called a control expression in its parentheses. It's just like an if statement. If this control expression is true, then we do go through the loop. If it's false, we don't go through the loop. So it's just like an if statement in that regard. So let's go further. Hey Patrick, you better be paying attention. We are now executing this line of code here. Tell me what to write on my scratch paper because of the current execution of this line of code. So Patrick, because num less than or equal to 3 is indeed true, I forgot to stress that, because this control expression is true right now with num being 1, we do go through the loop. And now we get to this line of code, Patrick, and please tell me loudly for the video, since I'm far away from you in this room right now, tell me what happens here because of this line of code.
0 plus 1 equals 1.
Good. The 0 that's currently in sum plus the 1 that's currently in num subtotals up to the total of 1, and that 1 plugs into, as he just said, into the variable sum. It always works from right to left. So we need to put a 1 in here. And Jeanette knows that we always like to put a little slash through there so we don't lose track of where we are. And next we execute this line of code. Hey, Dan B, what is this line of code doing at this moment in the program? Let me clear out our scratch work here. What happens because of this?
It's adding num and 1.
Good. And 1 plus 1 is what? 2. And where does that 2 go?
Num.
Into num. In other words, we just replaced 1 with itself and 1 added to it. That's like step 1. This line of code is kind of like that J step 1 up above. Just make a note of that. And anyway, we hit the phrase end while now. Elvis, what do you think end while does at the bottom of a while loop?
Ends the while loop.
It doesn't end it for good. It tells you to go back up to the top. That's what it tells you to do. It's like the word next is in a for loop. Now, I don't know why they didn't just invent VB to have the word next there. It would have made it simpler. But they didn't. So Patrick, who's still paying attention to everything I say here, we are now at the top of the loop, and we are looking at this control expression that simplifies to either true or false. Tell me, at this moment in time, based on these numbers that are currently in our variables, Patrick, is this control expression true or false?
That is true.
Correct. Because num, which is 2, is indeed less than or equal to 3, so it's a big fat T for true. So when it's true, that means we go through the loop again. A surprise coming ahead. Eventually, this is going to be false. And that'll be a sad day, because then you're at the end of the game. It's the end of the Hunger Games. There are no more books to read. It's always sad when you get to the end of a series. Well, we're not at the end. We still get to go through this loop again. So what is, let's give Andrew a chance to show off for the camera. What is sum plus num right now at this moment?
2 plus 1.
Good job, with no doubt in his mind. 2 plus 1 is 3, and that 3 goes into sum. So we cross that out, put a 3 there. And now, Jeanette, what is this line of code doing? What should I put over here on my scratch paper and where? 2 plus 1 is, okay, this 2, the num, plus 1 is 3, very good. So another 3 goes into, this time into num. So I cross this out and make it 3. We had end while. Elvis, what does end while do? It goes back up to the top. That's a weird thing. It says end, but it really goes back up to the top. And Bailey, what's this thing called in parentheses? What's the official vocab word for that? One more chance, Bailey. One more chance. What is this called? The stuff in the parentheses at the top of a while loop?
It's a control expression.
Okay, good. He knew that. So we go through the loop again because the control expression is currently 3 less than or equal to 3 right now. That is true. So we do go through the loop one more time. Okay, sum plus num is currently 6. So we put a 6 in sum because of the word sum there. And num plus 1 is currently 4. 3 plus 1 is 4, and that 4 goes into num. So we cross that out. And now we hit end while. And Elvis knows that end while sends you back up to the top. And now we check our control expression one more time. Shelby, is the control expression currently true or false?
It's false.
Because 4 is not less than or equal to 3. Yes, she did say false. And just like an if statement, when you have a false in a while loop, you do not go through the body of the loop again. You simply circle your final values on a worksheet like this where I check these answers, and that's the end. And by the way, number 2 was a while loop that does the same thing that this for loop does in exercise 1. The final result, 4 and 6, and the path to get there is the same darn thing. It is a true fact that in Visual Basic, for loops and while loops are interchangeable. Anytime that you have a while loop, you could rewrite it as a for loop and vice versa. So why do they give us both these loops in Visual Basic? Well, just like a wrench and pliers can pretty much do the same thing, why did they invent wrenches after pliers were already invented? I don't have the answer to this. Somebody back in the late 60s or early 70s probably sat down and said, I don't like the word for, so let's invent a while loop. Seriously, that's probably why. Well, later in the lecture notes, if you read ahead, there are style reasons why you should use a while loop instead of a for loop, but technically, you don't really need it. You could do anything with pliers that you do with a wrench if you had a strong enough grip in your hands. And probably a good plumber or a carpenter or whoever uses tools like that could pretty much use pliers to do anything, a wrench rather, to do anything that a pliers do, if it's an adjustable wrench, especially. Okay, a little talk about nothing there and moving on to number 3. Well, actually, it is important because while loops are the wrenches of the 21st century. Hey, let's do this one really quickly so that you have more confidence in this worksheet. Number 3, num is 11 and sum is 0. Check, check. The control expression is currently true because 11 is indeed less than or equal to 13. So we execute this line of code. I'm being fancy here with the plus equals. That's the same thing as sum equals sum plus num up here was. That line of code is the same as this line of code. I'm just using the shorter way of writing it with the plus equals. So take num, add it into sum. That crosses out that 0. Now we do a plus equals 1. Again, I'm being fancy. I'm shortening this counter statement here. That's the equivalent to that. So Jeanette knows that I add 1 there to 12. Elvis knows that I go back up to the top when I hit end while. So far, so good. Let's erase all this scratch work. Next up, I have to check my control expression. Is 12 less than or equal to 13? That's true. So we do this, which means take num and add it into sum. That's 23. Cross that out. Add 1 to num. Cross that out, make it 13. Okay, so far so good. We hit Elvis's end while statement. So we loop back up to the top. We look at Bailey's control expression. Is 13 less than or equal to 13? Yes, it is. So we add one more time. We add 13 into 23, which makes a grand total of 36, I believe. Crossing that out. We add one more to num. It hits 14. We loop back up to the top, and Shelby knows that at this moment, num, which is 14, is less than 13, is not less than or equal to 14. It's not less than or equal to 13. So it's false. We don't do anything else. We circle our final answers. Please do the rest of this worksheet for homework, but let's check out to see if there's anything tricky. Oh, tricky, number 4. We're adding 2 each time to num. So num is probably going to do something like this, 1, 3, 5, etc. I don't know where it stops. I'm just like kind of giving you a preview. It goes by 2s instead of by 1s because of this plus equals 2. How about number 5? Is there anything tricky here? Oh, num goes down by 1 each time, minus equals 1. That's kind of like a for loop having a step of -1. So num starts at 3, and it goes down 1 each time. I don't know where it stops. You won't figure that out probably until you do the homework. If it goes forever, it's called an infinite loop, which is usually a bad thing. But we'll see. When you do the homework tonight, you'll see. And finally, number 6 here that you can barely see in this video, num in that question has a star equals 2, which means num starts at 2, and you multiply by 2 each time. 2 times 2 is 4, but 4 times 2 is 8. That goes up to 16, and where that stops, nobody knows. You will have to trace this for homework tonight. Circle your final answers, and notice that the directions also tell you that if an error occurs in any one of these questions, if an error occurs, you are responsible for writing error and then trying to explain it in words. If an infinite loop occurs on any worksheet like this, just do like ... and write infinite loop as your answer. Okay, if you have any other questions, see me after school or at an appropriate time, or just rewatch the video.